And now, your go-to source for year-round fantasy hockey advice, DFS, and betting coverage. This is NHL Fantasy on Ice, presented by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.
Season preview time on the NHL Fantasy on Ice podcast, and the crew is back. Hope everyone is enjoying a great summer out there. Jake Hahn with you. We're kicking things off with our extensive fantasy rankings, risers, fallers from the offseason, with a focus on some of the biggest moves. The gang is almost all here, including Pete Jensen and producer Bob Bender. Nick Alberga away for the month of August, but we'll be getting him back in September. I'm going to start by welcoming in Chris Meany, though. How you doing this summer, Means?
What's going on, Jakey? It's been a great summer. It's going to be nice to catch up with you guys and talk a little bit about the offseason here in the NHL. Yeah, our guy Nicky, he's rocking a Nicholas Waugh jersey somewhere on the beach. I know it. This episode brought to you by Skip. Jake, it's been a fun offseason. We got a lot to get to.
Fun, maybe a little quiet for our liking, right? I think a lot we're hyping it up as this offseason where we're going to get some big moves and maybe offer sheets and all these sorts of things. I mean, I guess the offer sheets could still be on the table at some point, but kind of quiet. I think for the most part we did get some big moves. I think the biggest one, the one that's really going to shake up fantasy rankings and the conversation, is Mitch Marner going to the Vegas Golden Knights, right? Leaving the Toronto Maple Leafs after all these years. Pete Jensen, the crew over at NHL.com, as always, with the fantasy top 200, a bunch of different rankings out there. So go check those out. They've got Marner down at number 25. So your reaction to Mitch Marner going to Vegas, do we see a decline in production or maybe a rise in production?
It's hard to get a rise. I mean, he was top 5 in points and assists. Those were career numbers for him last year, but I think he's going to be right on par. I think the Maple Leafs are going to really miss Marner. I know he gets a lot of heat for his playoff production, but Jake, how could you not like him going to Vegas, away from the media attention? He can play loose. He's got Jack Eichel as his center. He has Mark Stone potentially as his right winger. Heck, if he plays in the second line with Hurdle and your boy, Dorofeyev, that's looking like a really nice top 6. So I think he's a strong fantasy target again, and I think he can make the debate. Do you want Marner or do you want Austin Matthews, Jake, in fantasy this year?
Meany, I'm just glad you remembered my boy, Pavel Dorofeyev. It's summertime, you kind of check out for a little bit. You still remember how high I am on him, and I don't know how it's going to affect a lot of the players. I'd like to think they'd still want him on that power play unit. And like you mentioned, I think it's hard to get a rise out of Marner. I mean, what's going to go to 110, 120 points? I don't think so, but I don't expect it as much of a decline. Seeing him down at 25, if that's the range he's getting drafted, Meany, second round, back end of the second round, mid-second round, I'd be all over that. I don't think it's going to be a drastic decline for Marner. I'm with you in the fact that I think Toronto is going to really miss him, especially with what he does on the power play facilitating. But I'm going to be in on Mitch Marner. I know, we're always worried about that first season with a new team, but I think Marner's ready to hit the ground running in Vegas.
This is it's a superstar two-way player. He takes a lot of heat for maybe not showing up and scoring goals in the postseason, but this is a terrific playmaker. He's going to be surrounded by a lot of talented players. You look at Vegas, unfortunately, it doesn't look like Alex Pietrangelo will be with the team, but they're still loaded on the blue line with Shea Theodore, so the power play should be great. And this time last year, Jake, we were talking about Austin Matthews as a top 5 player. Once McDavid, Draisaitl, and McKinnon go off the board, Cale Makar. Is that a lock for you now? Do you feel like Austin Matthews will take a little bit of a hit in terms of his goal scoring? Because he is missing one of the best primary assist guys since 2018. Only McDavid has more primary assists than Mitch Marner.
Well, I did notice it, and there's a flip side to all these conversations, right? We're going to get into Ehlers, Dobson, Peterka, some of the other big movers. So there's the team they're going to and the team that they're leaving, right? So you're talking about Matthews and, okay, where does the production go without Mitch Marner, a guy that he's generally played with a lot at even strength, obviously on the power play as well. I saw him down at number 9 on the NHL.com fantasy rankings, which is very low. As we know, Matthews perennially a top 5 guy, sometimes even top 3 player in fantasy hockey. I think 9's a little low for me, Meany. I still really like Austin Matthews and that goal scoring ability, and just go pull up his numbers season by season. It kind of goes monster season, down year, monster season, and his down years are like 40 plus goals still, but then monster season again. So I'm not saying he's going to flirt with 70, but I think he could get back into that 55, 60 range even without Mitch Marner. And if he's going to fall closer to the back end of the first round, I'm certainly in on Austin Matthews still.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about an elite goal scorer and somebody who likes to put the puck towards the net. So he's still going to be a really solid fantasy asset, but I wouldn't be shocked if maybe there's a downtick in terms of his goals, but he's still going to have a great player in Nyes on his wing as well, who had a breakout campaign last year. One player I'm really excited about is Nikolai Ehlers with the addition of Carolina. And across the league, was there a team that really needed a superstar player more than the Hurricanes? They've tried with Jake Gensel, didn't work out. Mikko Rantanen didn't work out. So getting Nikolai Ehlers, who's had 20 plus goals in eight of his last 10 seasons. He's a great 5-5 player. We know that this Hurricanes team is a terrific 5-5 team, but Jake, what do we say every time around playoff time? The goals tend to dry up. They need some secondary scoring. And for Ehlers, who's been essentially on the second line and second power play at times over the past few years, he had a career high in terms of power play points last year, and the Hurricanes had a bottom 10 power play. So I think it's just a perfect fit for Ehlers in Carolina.
On paper, it seems like the great fit. You mentioned how solid he is 5-on-5, so he fits into, I think, what the Canes want to do, the style of play and puck possession and all those sorts of things, and obviously helps them on the power play, which is one area that they struggled. If they can improve that power play, watch out for the Carolina Hurricanes. So I like Ehlers. I know he always comes with a bit of an asterisk with the injury tag, right? If he could stay healthy, but we say that with a lot of guys. I think at some point you just got to take some risks and say, hey, guys are going to get hurt. If I really like this player and I like the fit, I'm going to roll the dice and hope that he stays healthy throughout the course of the season. Obviously, there's a flip side to this conversation as well and how it affects Winnipeg, but I'm going to be in on Nick Ehlers, even in year one, and the fact that sometimes players do struggle year one with a new team.
Guys, I've been waiting over a month to chime in about this. How about the Danish-born Nikolai Ehlers teaming up with Freddie Anderson, who's again on that cheap one-year deal? The Canes are trying to win it all. They're trying to get past those Florida Panthers. We'll see if they'll be able to. But when you look at Nikolai Ehlers' ceiling, his career high in points so far in his career is 64. We're looking at him to make a jump by at least 10. I'm curious, Means and Jake, what you think his ceiling might be. Could he get into the 80s? Could he lead the Canes in scoring outright?
I think he can. And again, it's no disrespect to the players that he played with, but you look at the Jets' top line last year. He didn't really play with Kyle Connor. He didn't really play with Mark Scheifele and Velarde. He got some time on the power play. Now he's going to play with Sebastian Aho. There's no question. I know Rod Brendamore juggles his lines a little bit, but there's no question in my mind that majority of his 5-5 play and power play will be with Aho, maybe a little bit of Jarvis, Svechnikov, some players sprinkled in there. So I think we were, Pete, very aggressive on our projection for Nikolai Ehlers. I believe we got him at 75 points, and we're doing 32 and 32 over at NHL.com, looking at fantasy projections and edge stats. And the biggest thing is health. I think you alluded to it, Jake. But if this guy plays 65, 70 games, I do feel like he's a point per game player.
Well, and I do always worry about drafting Canes forwards in fantasy hockey just because they are such a spread out offense, right? They don't rely on one, and that's a good thing, right? You don't want to be, at least as a team, you don't want to be relying on one or two guys. But from a fantasy perspective, you probably like those one or two guys to be on your team if the team is top heavy. So they've always been a little bit more spread out. That being said, we're talking about a guy that we're drafting a little bit later, right? That's why you don't see too many Canes forwards in the top 10, top 20. Even Sebastian Aho doesn't generally go that high in these drafts. So I think there's plenty of value there. Meaning, I'm curious your thought on the Winnipeg angle of this. Are you worried about Nick Ehlers leaving there? Do you think they still have enough offense? Is this a boost for maybe a Gabe Velarde, who is already playing some good hockey? Cole Perfetti, a young guy, could maybe step up and soak up some more minutes?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up Cole Perfetti because I thought he had a breakout campaign last year. I thought he was terrific in the playoffs for the Jets as well. And this is a player that I would expect to get more ice time, especially on the power play. But I am concerned about the Jets. And I know that there's sound between the pipes and Connor Hellebuck. He's been fantastic back-to-back Vezinas. But I'm sure the Jets will make the playoffs. They'll compete. But this is a big loss for them. Just like losing Marner in Toronto. It's a big loss. And I know the Leafs had 4 or 5 different players come in and try to fill the void. Pete, what did the Jets do to fill the void here with Nikolai Ehlers? I think they're really going to miss him in terms of their secondary scoring.
Yeah, they didn't do all that much, honestly, and I worry about them. I wonder what their floor is going to be. Utah got better. Utah's got a great young core. The teams in California, Anaheim and San Jose, over time could contend for a wild card spot. Maybe Anaheim getting Granlund, getting Kreider, some veteran leadership to complement their young core. I don't know if those two teams are there yet, but if you look at multiple teams shaking up maybe the Western Conference playoff picture, you could go with the safe teams, Jake. But like if one or two other teams jumps in, unfortunately, you could be looking at a floor of the Jets missing the playoffs. And I'm not trying to be a negative Nelly, but they're going to miss Ehlers in many different ways. His speed, his shot, and a lot of other things that he does underlying stats-wise.
Pete, you teed me up for something I've been dying months, ever since I spoke to you guys to talk about this team. And it's going to be really hard for me to not go all in on the Utah Mammoth in fantasy hockey this year. Now, I don't know if it's going to result in a playoff spot. I hope so. I hope they can compete for a playoff spot. I think a lot of us were hopeful even last year before they were the Mammoth, when they were still the hockey club. Now they got the jersey, the logo. They bring in JJ Peterka from Buffalo, a player I really like. I've talked about a lot on this podcast as well. So they just look that top six just looks loaded. It's just a fun fantasy team and a team I think could score a lot of goals this year. Again, will it result in a playoff spot? We'll see. But I think from a fantasy perspective, there's a lot of players I'm interested in Utah this year.
Can I just say I love the name too?
Yeah,
and the logo. It's sharp. I mean, I saw Vejmelka's pads on Instagram, I think a couple weeks ago. He put the pads together. He got the Mammoth there. This is a fun team. It's going to be an exciting team. And, Pete's boy, JJ Peterka, leaving Buffalo, another player that leaves the Sabres, most likely going to have success away from Buffalo. Career high in terms of points last year, 68. The way that he finished the season, 42 points in 41 games. He one of 15 players, 23 or younger, to have 60 points last year. Utah had 3 of them. And Dylan Guenther and Logan Cooley. And you look at just up and down their lineup, they got a lot of speed. They got some sandpaper. They bring in Nate Schmidt, who I thought was pretty underrated for the Florida Panthers, en route to another Stanley Cup. And Brendan Tanev there as well. So more sandpaper in the bottom 6. So love the pickup. JJ Peterka, unfortunately, Pete, again, Buffalo losing a nice young player, but we have him as a fringe top 60 forward in our rankings. But his ceiling, whether he plays on that top line or the second line, I mean, he may not even get top power play time. This is a team that's going to score a lot of goals this year, Pete.
Right, and this is also bad news for Tage Thompson fantasy managers, right? Like, let's be real. We had Tage. We were really riding a high with him. He was like around the top 20 overall right after the end of the season, and we bumped him down a little bit after he lost his trusted line mate Peterka. Sure, some other guys in Buffalo will, join the equation. There's Yuri Kulik. There's, of course, Jack Quinn and some other guys like Benson that could be deep sleepers. But, I mean, Buffalo, a team that has missed the playoffs 15 years in a row, losing a great young player like JJ Peterka and not getting as much back for him, Jake, that I thought they could have. That's really bad news for Tage's ceiling and also for the Sabres in general.
I like how Meany phrased it, the Buffalo bump. When a player leaves Buffalo, it's just instant success. Maybe not instant, but within a couple years, they're already producing, maybe even competing for Stanley Cups. So who knows if that's on the horizon for Peterka. And then Buffalo gets the hug from distance from Bowen Byram as well. A lot of rumors out there saying maybe he wasn't long for the Sabres. I can't really blame anybody with the state of that organization right now. So he ends up just signing a 2-year deal there. And that doesn't look like it's going to last very long. But who knows? Maybe the Sabres can surprise us. I highly doubt it here, though, guys. But back to Utah, I mean, looking at that top 6, that group of forwards that I said I really like, Dylan Guenther, Clayton Keller. Now you bring JJ Peterka in there. Who do you think is the guy that's going to be shooting the puck? I mean, at some point, there's only one puck out there, unless they change hockey and they add a second puck or a third puck out there. But you got a lot of puck-dominant guys that like to shoot the puck. So is there a guy you're maybe favoring there to get the shot share, or is it just going to be a game-by-game basis?
It may be a game-by-game basis. I do believe Peterka is probably a guy that's going to be on the second power play, and we'll talk about another team, too. It's that may have a better second power play that improved over the offseason here in a couple of minutes. But Dylan Guenther, how could he not be the shooter, right? Clayton Keller is a terrific playmaker, and he can shoot the puck as well. And Logan Cooley was kind of playing in that bumper role for them as well. Sergachev will shoot from the point. But the way that Dylan Guenther fires the puck, I mean, this guy is electric. And there was a span last year, I believe we talked about him, where he had a game-winning goal in 4 or 5 consecutive games, and he had like 9 goals in a 5-goal span. And this guy he's a terrific player. So I would say he's the shooter, and maybe you have Peterka on that second unit, or maybe you load up and you have 5 forwards at times. I mean, Pete, there's a lot of options there for Utah, but for me, it's hard to imagine Gunther not being that trigger man at the top of the circle.
No, it's true. And I really step back and look at it and say, who has the best young core in the entire NHL right now? Utah's got to be in that conversation. I know Montreal did a lot, guys. I know Chris has been excited to get to this because they made a young core even better, right? By bringing in Dobson and Zach Bolduc. I thought they fleeced the Blues on that one for whatever reason. So curious what you guys think. Start with Means, Montreal or Utah for best young core, or is it somebody else? I'm talking about fantasy stacking, fantasy upside collectively with a group of young players here.
I may have to lean with the Habs. It's been 15 minutes before we've talked about maybe the most improved team. Let's be honest. When you incorporate some of these younger players getting better, like the season that Lane Hudson had, Nick Suzuki 5th in points when the calendar turned to 2025, Cole Caulfield, then you bring in Noah Dobson, who fits the mold, a 25 and under player, right shot defenseman, again, who may not get top power play time. This is a guy who's 2 years removed from 70 points. He may play on the second unit. How about Patrick Laine with all the goals that he had, not in the young core, but also a player that maybe on that second power play unit, Jake, and then you incorporate Demidov. So it's a really nice young core. I like what the Sharks are doing. I actually like what the Ducks are doing as well. And Utah, maybe a little bit more top heavy with some of those goal scorers that we alluded to earlier. But the Canadians are set up to have success. They're the youngest team in the NHL. And Jake, they certainly exceeded expectations. I don't feel like they're a lock to make the Stanley Cup playoffs, and they're there yet, but they're certainly on their way.
Well, the Atlantic is so interesting, guys, right? Are Montreal and Ottawa going to follow up the seasons that they had? Is Boston going to be as bad as they were last year? Can they get back into the conversation, right? Do we get, maybe a surprise down season from a Tampa or a Toronto or something to maybe open up another spot? So a lot of intrigue there. The one thing I will say about Dobson, you kind of alluded to it, he might not get first power play time. And that, to me, that's an issue when I'm drafting him in fantasy hockey. As much as I love what the Habs are doing, and I think they're trending in the right direction, I like this move for the future. You got depth on the back end. You're going to have a good second unit. I don't know if I'm going to be in on Dobson in fantasy just for that reason. I think there is going to be that lean towards Lane Hudson, right, for that first power play unit.
I think it's absolutely fair. Yeah, we have him as a fringe top 20 defenseman. If he was just on the Islanders, he would be around top 15 for me anyways, just given the usage. We know that he would be top power play, but I think it's a good real-life move for the Canadians to put him on that top pair with Caden Gooley. You can load up the top power play with Suzuki, Slavkovsky as a net front presence, Demidov, and then you have Hudson there. And then on your second unit, it's not appealing from a fantasy perspective, but you have Dobson and then maybe Patrick Laine, and really kind of glossed over Zach Bolduc. I know Pete mentioned him as well, but 19 goals as a rookie, averaging 12 minutes per game. This is a guy that throws his body around, over 100 plus hits. So we have him around 160 in our rankings, probably like a deep sleeper. I would say he gets more ice time in Montreal. He can play that bumper role, improve their second power play unit. But after the Four Nations face-off, roughly late February, he led all rookies in goals. He had 13 and 26. So he's got a terrific shot. He's got some speed. He's going to bring a lot to the Canadians. But you bring up a really good point. And Pete, that's, when you're talking about players coming in, some players benefit, like the Islanders, maybe. We don't know at the moment for Matthew Schaefer, but this is a player that could get a lot of ice time right off the hop, like Lane Hudson, and on the power play. But on the other side, maybe you stay clear of Dobson because, the usage rate won't be as high.
I want to get into some of those deep sleepers guys or players at the back of that fantasy 200. Pete, I also want to get your take on McKinnon over McDavid at the top of the board. That one jumped out to me right away when I pulled up the fantasy 200. So we'll get into that and a lot more on the other side.
NHLShop.com, the official online store of the National Hockey League and the world's largest selection of officially licensed NHL fan gear. With unique, one-of-a-kind designs by Fanatics and all the latest styles for every NHL team. Don't miss out. Shop now and get today's special offer. NHLShop.com, a Fanatics experience.
Hey everyone, Adnan and Verk here to talk about our great podcast, NHL Unscripted with Verk and Demers.
Jason Demers here. After playing 700 NHL games, it turns out I have an opinion or two. Whoever's saying trade one of them, you don't know anything about hockey. I'm on the bandwagon. I'm rooting for this team. With new guests every week, we will talk about hockey and more.
Can't wait till you watch this movie because it's the biggest award of her career.
He went into the cheetah exhibit. The cheetah took a piece out of him, and he came into the ring the next day.
Tune in to NHL Unscripted with Verk and Demers, the iHeartRadio app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Get the official NHL app to watch, read, and listen to all the deeks.
All I can say is absolutely wow.
All the sauce. All the saves.
Stop from Vasilevsky.
All the hits. All the snipes. All the sellies.
He scores! Unbelievable!
All the hockey. If it's hockey, it's here. Listen to every NHL game for free, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Download the official NHL app now.
Back on NHL Fantasy on Ice, brought to you by Skip, Jay Kahn, Chris Meany, Pete Jensen with you. Nick Alberga, no idea where the guy is. He could be in any country at the moment, but we are getting him back, I believe, in September, right, Producer Bobby?
Forget Nick. He's out. He's he's scheduled to come back in September, but honestly, I'm listening to the show. I'm like, what? Nick, I hate to say we don't really need you, Nick. So, I'm sure you want to stay out on the beach, so stay on the beach as long as you can. These guys will handle the season preview episodes, and away we go. Meany filling in admirably, I'd say. Huh, Chris? How about that? How do you feel? You feeling good, huh?
I'm feeling great. Yeah, it's been an awesome summer, and I'll go back to Nick and how he's feeling about losing Mitch Marner. If he was here, he'd say, "Hey, listen, talk to me in April." We won't miss him in April, but Jake, I think he's going to miss him throughout the season. All those little nice passes over to Matthews. I think him and Matthews will miss Marner this year.
I think Leaf fans are really going to miss him in the regular season. Look, I always say this: regular season Mitch Marner is a heck of a hockey player. Obviously, the playoffs leave you wanting more. I will say I thought he was a little bit better in the playoffs this past year. Still not probably what you want from a player like that, and does tend to go away in some of those big games and those big moments. But regular season, Marner cooks, and pressure off a little bit in Vegas. I know there's always pressure, year one with a new team and all those sorts of things, but he's got tons of talented players there to play with. So I think he's going to hit the ground running. I do think there's going to be a bit of a feeling out process for the Maple Leafs, but I teased it before we quickly took a break there. Pete, I need to ask you about this. I pull up the NHL Fantasy 200 rankings as I always do this time of the year. Okay, what kind of takes do they have? Who's rising? Who's falling? It's always a great list. Nathan MacKinnon at number 1 over Connor McDavid. I've always thought McDavid at 1 until further notice, but the Nate Dogg at the top of your list, Pete. Any reason for that?
I love that it's a debate. A couple of years ago, I got destroyed for even bringing up the question, like maybe long-term ceiling. McKinnon's ceiling could be similar to McDavid's. I remember that backlash, but now it's a real debate, and I feel like a lot of the fans on the Instagram account will support me in that. And I think that the past 2 seasons combined means MacKinnon leads the entire NHL in even strength points, which is a very telling category about a player's living up to a high draft pick in fantasy like that. Also leads all players over those past 2 seasons in shots on goal. The guy is an absolute beast. He's just as fast as McDavid, but I think he's even more of a horse when you look at his all-around game and what he's molded into. So I think it's a debate, and I might even lean with MacKinnon over McDavid, coming off his 3rd straight 110-plus season in terms of points. Pretty incredible what Mac is building here.
Yeah, and it was really fun to see those guys in the East Coast where I'm at in Nova Scotia with Brad Marchand, and we had a heck of a playoff run. Crosby and Nate, they're all hanging out. They're having a good time. I'll put this on me. I'll take all responsibility. Send all your hate to me, because halfway through last year, I said, Pete, we got to put MacKinnon at 1. And the consistency that he has, and I think it really does depend, Jake, on your settings. If you're just playing in a straight goals, assists, points, fine. I won't fight anybody on McDavid. But if you are incorporating shots on goal, like it's that's how you split the ties. I mean, 320 shots. This guy shoots the puck so much. He's been consistent. He didn't fall off when they lost Mikko Rantanen. They're still loaded inside that top 6. Valeri Nichushkin, Duran's gone there. I mean, Gabriel Landeskog is a player that we're all hoping can play 65-plus games this year. I thought he looked really good in the opening round against the Stars last year in the playoffs. So, yeah, I don't think you can go wrong. I mean, Leon Draisaitl is the guy that seems to score all of the goals between those 2 guys consistently as well. So if you get pick 3, pick 4, you're still going to get a very good player, but I would take Nate at 1.
I think at the very least we've settled the debate at 2, right? If it was always McDavid 1, okay, is it Draisaitl? Yeah. Is it McKinnon? Is it maybe Kucherov at 2? I think Matthews was in that conversation a couple of years as well. It's clearly Nate for me, even though Draisaitl scores a ton of goals. Shots aren't necessarily there, so I'm still leaning McDavid, guys. I don't know what it is. It's just the name. It's everything that he does, and I guess the ceiling potential. But I totally hear what you're saying with the shots on goal. Knowing that you're going to get you could get a 7, 8, 9, 10 shot on goal game from Nathan MacKinnon any night, and that could win you that category. That's enticing. Sticking with Colorado before we get into some of the players lower on the list, guys, I did see Cale Makar at number 5 on the list. Obviously, the first defenseman off the board. No surprise there that he would be the first defenseman, but number 5, quite high. Meaning, when you're drafting, is this something you think about where you can cross off a D spot? Because I tend to think it gets pretty thin. Once you get past the first power play guys in that defense slot, there's not a lot of guys that you have a ton of interest in. So if you could cross off a number 1 D spot early with a Cale Makar, I think it does make sense. And I think that's why the boys have him in the top 5.
Yeah, absolutely. And, last year, I believe you finished 6th overall in our settings. We're incorporating shots and blocks and power play points. And, again, it really does depend on your settings, but if you play in a league where you only rostered 3 defensemen and you walk away with Cale Makar, I think it's a big advantage than the rest of your league mates, because there is a bit of a drop off. Zach Werenski had a great season. Does he replicate that? And then you have Quinn Hughes, who also had a good season. Then there is a drop off after that. You're getting into some other tiers. So Cale Makar, when he's playing, he's well over a point per game guy. I mentioned the Avs and they're loaded. So you can have the debate between, do you want to stick with forwards and go Kirill Kaprizov, Kucherov, Brady Tkachuk, the category coverage that he has, Matthews we talked about, David Pastrnak. The Bruins were not a good hockey team last year, Pete, but David Pastrnak, when the calendar turned to 2025, this guy led the NHL in points. It was just essentially him and Morgan Geekie every single night. So there are a lot of great forwards that you can maybe turn your attention to, but I think if those big 3, big 4, Pete, went off the board that we talked about earlier with Jake, I'm comfortable picking Cale Makar.
Yeah, I like Makar over Pastrnak just because I worry about what that Bruins team, after missing the playoffs, finishing behind Buffalo, did they get any better in the offseason? Couple of little stealth moves, but I don't really think they did. I worry about Pastrnak and what his floor could be. It's crazy when you look at the Atlantic Division and we're talking about all these other teams that might make the playoffs, might miss. Toronto gets worse, Montreal gets better, all these other teams. And we've barely mentioned on this show that the Florida Panthers, Jake, were able to retain Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett, and Aaron Ekblad. Curious what you guys think about what that means fantasy-wise. Is Florida's third line going to be the beast that it was in the postseason? Who's it going to be, Ekblad or Seth Jones on Power Play 1? There's so much to dissect about the back-to-back defending Stanley Cup champs. Feels like they're just as good as they were last year.
Keeping the band together, Pete, and it's not one of those bands that you feel like, okay, it's time to hang it up. It's time to get off the stage. Like it's a little too long. You're too old. I don't know what you're still hanging on for. These guys are still really good. Now we could get to that a few years down the road, right? We could be looking at this team and going, okay, they're banged up. They've played a lot of hockey. They're getting a little bit older. That could be a conversation in the future. But for right now, this team is still really good. I mean, what's going to happen in a few months that's going to change what we just watched in the playoffs from this team? This team was incredible. Now, it means my one worry might be, playoffs Florida Panthers are a little bit different from regular season Florida Panthers. Not that they aren't good in the regular season, but maybe not quite so dominant, and they can slow play it a little bit. And obviously no Matt Tkachuk as well. A couple months to start the season. But this is something this team is kind of used to. I think there's just so many bodies, so many teams I'd be interested, or so many players I'd be interested in at the top of that lineup that I'm not overly concerned about the Matt Tkachuk injury to start the season.
No, there's no reason to be. I mean, remember we were talking in the final month of the season, is Florida done? They looked like they were done, but they flipped the switch, right? They just put on cruise control, waited to the playoffs, and nobody really tested them. I know the Maple Leafs tested them at times, but it never ever felt like they were going to lose that series. So yeah, they're loaded up and down. I mean, Sam Reinhart is an elite goal scorer that doesn't get drafted high. I feel like he's a little bit underrated. in terms of fantasy hockey. Same with Barkov, Carter Verhaeghe. I would expect a bounce back campaign. I believe he had a career low in terms of shooting percentage. And then Pete mentions the third line. We all thought at the time, myself included, that Brad Marchand was going to play with Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk in the playoffs. We didn't even see that. We saw him on the second unit. We saw him on the third line with Lindell and Luostarinen, who were amazing at 5-5. I think those two players with Marchand, depending on your format, deep sleepers. So the Panthers are loaded. Pete also mentioned, last year, I think they were the only team that rocked two defensemen on the power play in Ekblad and Seth Jones. So it'll be a full year of Seth Jones and Brad Marchand with the Panthers. Yeah, there's a lot to like about Florida. Tampa as well. Those two teams I think will still be very strong in the Atlantic. Then you're looking at other teams like Detroit. Did they really do enough to improve? I know they have John Gibson, but it's been a few years since we've seen elite John Gibson. So I think the offense is pretty quiet in Boston, potentially Buffalo, and Detroit. But there is one team I actually wanted to bring up with you guys that we were talking about improved teams, and Pete kind of mentioned them, glossed over them. The Anaheim Ducks. The Ducks getting Joel Quenneville, who's an experienced head coach. They had the worst power play in the league last year. They bring in Mikael Granlund, who I thought was really good in San Jose. And between Dallas and San Jose, he had roughly 70 points. But he had 45 and 55 games with the Sharks. A couple years ago, 60 and 69 games. Those were very bad San Jose teams. So he can play up and down the lineup anywhere, power play, penalty kills, center, wing. Chris Kreider, we talked about him last year, Jake, having a bad season. Then you look and it's like, oh, he had 22 goals. He's fourth in power play goals over the last 5 seasons. The Ducks had that worst power play. So they have a nice mix. It kind of reminds me of the Canadians in terms of skill. Young skill in Cutter Gauthier, Carlson, McTavish, Terry, Lacombe. And then that veteran presence in Kreider, Vetrano, Granlund, Killorn, Strome. And then the experience behind the bench. I know Utah's a team that it sounds like we all like them to make the playoffs, but Jake, I think the Ducks are going to be a very fun squad. I think they're going to score some goals. Dostal is a breakout candidate for me, and I think they'll flirt with the playoff spot.
They're going to be a trendy pick, I think, to make the playoffs because we're always looking for that next team, right? I think we're all kind of in on Utah. It feels like now there's only so many spots in the West, as we know, is very difficult to make the playoffs with how many solid teams there are. Just look at the Central alone. You could go 5 deep. You get to Minnesota and St. Louis behind maybe the big 3, and you start to run out of playoff spots pretty quickly. So I think Anaheim can compete. I don't know if I'm ready to put them in the postseason just yet, but I think from a fantasy perspective means there's a lot of interest there. I love what they've done with their blue line, right? It's a great mix of youth, and Lacombe is a guy I'm going to be very interested in. Pete, I saw him, right around 100, I think just below 100 on your fantasy list there. I think he could be in for a legitimate breakout season, and they've mixed in some veterans, some beef on the back end with the Trouba. Meany mentions Kreider up front. So, Pete, are you in on Anaheim from a fantasy perspective? It might be tough to target exactly which players to go for, but there should be a lot of interest in the Ducks this year.
I think you can narrow it down and look at Jackson Lacombe as a bona fide top 20 fantasy defenseman because regardless of who's playing on that first power play unit among forwards, you know that he's going to be there. He created a lot of separation between the rest of the young defensemen out in Anaheim. And then Lucas Dostal. We've been saying this for years. Whenever Gibson leaves, whenever they trade him, whatever happens with him, it's going to benefit Lucas Dostal. I like Dostal more than I like Gibson in Detroit from a fantasy standpoint, from a win standpoint when we do our projections. So that's the direction that I would go, the back end out. And I think both of those guys, you could cement them as having like 25 plus wins at least, maybe a ceiling of 30 plus for Dostal. And I think that Lacombe's going to take another step forward and be a 50 plus point defenseman, maybe even 55, 60.
He's probably the guy that I want the most because of what P said. We feel like he could quarterback that power play, and then all these other Ducks are going to go late in drafts so you can take some flyers on. Cutter Gauthier would probably be my second favorite. Mason McTavish, we'll see what happens with him. But I got a question, Jake, for you. You're taking a shot talking about deep sleepers here. Do you roll the dice on a guy like Chris Kreider? You get the goals, maybe 20 plus, top power play time. How about Trevor Zegras? Trevor Zegras and Michkov together? Are you kidding me? It'd be like beer league hockey, between the legs, between leg passes, over the shoulder goals, flipping behind the net. Torts is not there. I don't know how Tocchet can handle it. But Trevor Zegras, a fresh start for him with Michkov, that can be an electric duo.
I was going to say, I kind of wish Torts was still there. Zegras, Michkov, trying the Michigan every single game. If you have a Michigan category in fantasy hockey, Michigan attempts, I think that's the play. Go with those guys because they're going to be trying all those sorts of things that you mentioned. But maybe there is something to be said for a second chance, right? You get out of a place where it's not really working. You get a change of scenery, another look. I mean, I've never been the biggest Zegras guy, but I could get there, especially with where he's going to be drafted. Meanie, I'll throw one back at you. And this is, I think, a topic that's going to be debated a lot as we head towards fantasy drafts. Connor Bedard, year 3. I saw him down around, I think it was 76 on Pete's list on the top 200. Last year was so disappointing. There was just nights where it looked hard. It was hard to watch almost. The body language wasn't great. Blackhawks don't seem to be that improved as a roster, but can we expect a better season from Bedard this year?
I think we can. I'm still on team Macklin Celebrini. I think he brings so much more to the table than Connor Bedard, but we're not writing off Bedard as heading into year 3, as you mentioned. And year 1 was great from a point per game standpoint. Step back last year. Look at the lineup. It's still very similar. Like Frank Nazar as a breakout candidate. We have him in the 32 and 32 in terms of breakouts. This is a guy that finished really strong last year. Sam Renzel on the back end. I'm interested in him as like a late round pick. Chicago actually had a top 10 power play last year. A lot of that had to do with Connor Bedard and the breakout from Donato. So I think we could see him in the mid 70s. I think that would be a good season for him if he had 70 to 75 points. But this is still going to be a very bad Chicago team. I would expect them bottom 5. I think the only addition they've really brought in was Andre Burakovsky. He's like maybe somebody that can play inside the top 6 for them. But Pete, there's still a lot of work for the Blackhawks to do. But Bedard is one of those players that I would expect a breakout campaign. If he's on the Olympic squad, that would be good for his outlook as well. But there's still a lot of work for the Blackhawks to do. They're still very, very young. But some of these first-round picks that they have, Pete, we're starting to see them now. And they do have a bright future. Maybe not like the Canadians and the Sharks and Utah we're talking about and the Ducks, but they're right there in a team that's trending up.
Jake, I love what the Sharks are doing, even if they miss the playoffs again, right? They got Dickinson coming up. They drafted Misa, who's another elite prospect to join with Celebrini and Will Smith, and they have Askarov. I mean, I feel like the Sharks are really building something special in terms of having elite prospects at each of the 3 main positions in hockey, and then the forward group is going to be amazing with Celebrini and Misa long term.
I think they're going to be one of those teams, again, kind of similar to last year, but probably better, where we're going to love them for fantasy. We're going to be drafting some players and get excited about some of these young players. They're probably still going to lose a lot of hockey games because defending, keeping the puck out of their net, I believe will still be a problem. But Celebrini looked like a stud last year, means. I mean, I get we saw Bedard take a step back in year 2, and people might be saying, well, same thing could happen to Celebrini. I don't know about that. He just looks special. He looks different. I'm ready to go all in on Celebrini. And Misa, who knows with rookies and kids stepping into the league, but he obviously looks like a great talent. We saw Will Smith. Even Eklund is a guy that I really like, not quite as young as some of the other guys, but I thought he had a sneaky good season last year for San Jose. So you could go up and down the list. A lot of Sharks I think I'll be interested in this year.
Yeah, it may be a year or 2 before we see Misa and Dickinson, but San Jose is really set up to have success. And I think Askarov too, depending on if you're playing in leagues with saves, he may hurt your ratios a little bit, but if you're in a points league with saves, he should rack up a ton of them, and I thought he was good in a very small sample size. I know Pete wants to get to the Islanders, so I'm going to rapid fire through. Pete, who do you think will have a better fantasy season? We have Matias Maccelli in Toronto, an opportunity maybe to play inside the top 6 with Marner gone. Vladimir Tarasenko, Minnesota. Jonathan Toews with the Jets, or Jonathan Drouin with the New York Islanders.
I think these really secondary moves that the Islanders have made, I know obviously Matthew Schaefer long-term, he's going to be the face of the franchise. He's going to be an impact player, whether he plays this year or waits. Kid's only like 17 years old, so give him some time. But I think with Drouin joining a power play that's been terrible for a long time, you might even see Schaefer up there on PP1 if he makes the team. I hope he does. And then they also got Shabanov from the KHL, who I think is a big-time fantasy sleeper. And all of that should, in a real prove-it year for Patrick Waugh, improve this power play that has been dreadful for a long time.
I like Maccelli, too, out of those players that you mentioned, Meanie, as a bit of a long shot, right? He's not going to get drafted high at all, and I think there's potential there to maybe carve out a nice spot for himself, because I think people forget how talented he was just a couple years ago, and still is. He's still a young player. I think he just kind of got lost in that offense a little bit, and the Maple Leafs might need somebody to step up, some extra minutes, obviously, with Marner gone there, so I like the potential. I don't don't know about Jonathan Toews in Winnipeg. No one's seen him play for so long. I want to root for him. I know we're all rooting for him. It's a great story. He comes home to Winnipeg and joins a team that could be a contender this year. But I don't know. How are you treating Toews in Winnipeg? I think I'm just going to sit this one out, kind of see how it goes. But I'll root for him from the sidelines for sure.
Yeah, I'm really rooting for him as well. Him and Gabriel Landeskog, I want to see these guys be healthy and play. And I still think that they can bring something to their respective teams. Obviously, the fantasy ceiling is a little higher for Gabe than it is for Jonathan Toews. It's been a minute, you're right, since we've seen him play. And they'll need him to be productive, especially if you're going to have that second line center role. We talked about Perfetti earlier as well. So I like the Michelli call, right? He's 17 goals, 57 points, just a couple years removed from that. And there will be an opportunity, again, back to Mariners. We put a bow on the show with the Leafs and the opportunity here for him, maybe Max Domi, Bobby McCann. There's going to be opportunity for somebody to step inside the top six, whether it's alongside Nyes and Matthews or Tavares or William Nylander. One final player for me, Andrew Mangiapane. It's another year where the Oilers lost some depth, right? Isaac Howard is a guy that can maybe step in. Matt Savoy could step in, maybe play top 6 minutes here and there. But Vander Kane, no longer in Edmonton, Vancouver. Connor Brown, they lost him to the Devils. This is a back-to-back. They've been to the finals back-to-back years. They have those two superstar forwards, and they brought Bouchard back, extended him. But there's an opportunity, I guess, for some other players that will not get drafted high. Mangiapane didn't have that season peak that we thought he would in Washington. He was buried. But if you go back to his Calgary years, top 6 role, top power play, I believe he had a 35-goal season. This is a player that we could see alongside McDavid, could be a deep sleeper.
Yeah, I'm more interested in Isaac Howard, Hobie Baker. The guy is being overlooked for some reason. The Lightning traded him to Edmonton. This is an opportunity for Edmonton in what is we're talking about make or break seasons. I mean, they could lose Connor McDavid in the future. Maybe he re-ups on a short-term deal. We'll see. But maybe if he could find some chemistry with a young player of Isaac Howard's ilk, Jake, maybe that could be another reason to convince him to stay. I know he's buddies with Draisaitl, but they need to do more. Hopefully they find a hidden gem in Howard.
I do like to take a shot on those ceiling floor type play, right? Like it could not work out at all. He might not fit in the NHL and it might not be a pick that works for you in fantasy, but I always like the ceiling potential, and I'm playing to win the league, not finish, 4th or 5th or 6th. So I like that call. One final one for me before we wrap this thing up, guys. This again is going to be a topic that will be debated quite a bit going into the season. Mini bounce back potential for the Nashville Predators. Jonathan Marchessault, Steven Stamkos for fantasy. Personally, I'm out. I'm going to let somebody else make that call. I get it. Team that had a really bad season. How could it get worse? There's got to be bounce back potential. I just think they might just be bad. It might just be a bad roster. But I don't know if you feel different, if there's any potential for a bounce back in Nashville.
I don't think so. And my goodness, I said it a few times last year. I'm not out. They have a low shooting percentage. Stamkos and Marchessault and Forsberg and Yossi, all of them. Low shooting percentage. They'll turn this thing around, but they're just top heavy. They're older. I don't believe Roman Yossi's healthy at the moment. We'll see. Rooting for him because he's still, when he plays, he's got top 5 upside at the defense position. But this is a team that they don't really have any secondary scoring. I feel for Saros between the pipes because he's a good goalie. They gave up a lot at 5-5. So I'm out on the Predators. I don't think that they may have 3 or 4 more wins. But I know Vegas has them as projected as a borderline playoff team, but not for me.
Yeah, I'm really worried about this team. Hopefully for their sake, Roman Josi is healthy after that medical situation that caused him after the injury to miss the second half of the season pretty much. He's still elite when he's healthy. I would invest in Forsberg and Josi, but that's about it. I'm taking a pass on all those other Nashville guys. One other bounce back team I have to mention, with Gavrikov joining the Rangers, I think it could help on the top pair for Fox to bounce back and also for Igor Shesterkin to have some defensive help, get rid of K'Andre Miller and pick up one of the best underlying defensemen in the league in Gavrikov from a shot differential standpoint and possession. He was great for the Kings. The Kings are going to miss him, and the Rangers are going to love that guy. The Rangers also had the best coaching hire of the offseason, in my humble opinion, in Mike Sullivan. They'll probably find a way to get back to the playoffs under Sully.
Yeah, Gabe Perreault is a borderline top 10 rookie, I think, this year. He'll get an opportunity with Kreider gone, maybe in the top 6. And Mika Zibanejad, Jake, you're talking about bounce-back candidates. He was a point-per-game player when they acquired JT Miller, so maybe he can bounce back. And one thing Nick would say if he was here, only X amount of days before Connor McDavid is a Toronto Maple Leaf. And you all know he's listening, and he has a smile on his face saying thank you, because I would have said that 5 times on this show.
You could follow Nick for the McDavid to the Leafs countdown, although it's not happening, Nick. It's not happening. He's going to sign with Edmonton. He'll stick around, but hey, one can hope, and I know Nick is out there hoping we will get him back in September. Boys, this was fun. It was fun to get back at it. Great to get an episode into us and get through the rankings, get the juices flowing. We're going to have plenty of coverage throughout August, a lot of different episodes, angles leading up to your fantasy drafts. This episode was brought to you by Skip. This was the NHL Fantasy on Ice podcast. We'll see you next time.